Hello, my friend. This is Clyde. Those walls are coming down. Joshua 6 and verse 20 says, When the trumpets sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. This has been an epic journey. 40 years before, nearly 2 million people walked away from 400 years of slavery in Egypt, heading towards the promised land. God had promised their forefathers that he would give them and their generation forever a land that was prosperous, that was going to be their permanent home. Those ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, believed it, but it did not happen in their lifetime. So now, here are their descendants, and they are following an 80-year-old man with a crazy style of leadership. The journey was to have taken approximately 11 days, but they messed up. Built idols, grumbling and fussing with Moses about food and water, believing the 10 spies who griped about the promised land. And so here they are, 40 years later. All the adults who left Egypt 40 years ago had died in the desert, and now Joshua is leading a whole new generation to the promised land. But how was he going to get in? Let us see. God had a planned meeting with Joshua, so when they were near to the walled city of Jericho, Joshua had an encounter with God. Moses had one of those encounters. The angel introduced himself, and Joshua was terrified and nervously asked, "What message does the Lord have for his servant?" The angel said, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing on is holy." Joshua did that. Now that God has got Joshua's attention, God was about to give him the most powerful and specific instruction on how to get on the inside. The message from God was going to be dramatic. Let us walk through the steps. Number 1, Joshua had a relationship with God. It is weird to think about it, but it is impossible for you to have faith in a God you don't have a relationship with. Joshua knew God personally, and so when he had this encounter with someone he did not recognize at first, very early in the conversation, he knew that this angel was an assignment from God. What message does my Lord have for his servant? Joshua knew that one had to be in relationship with God in order for you to be able to have encounters with God's representative. Do you have a real relationship with God? Number 2, God gives instructions. God gave Joshua specific instruction on how to get to his destiny. God is not bound by human standards and methodology. Instead, the instructions from God were to send the priests in front as they carried the Ark of the Covenant, which represents the presence of God. Just imagine you are going up against something formidable. You need the presence of God with you. That way you are likely to hear God speak clearly. They did something crazy. The Israelites were willing and ready to do what Joshua told them, and believe me, they did it. Remember, the city was walled from one end to the other, and with some powerful gates for those who are leaving to go through, but otherwise they were locked. For 7 days they marched around the city, no singing, no clapping of hands, just the trumpeters blowing softly. The people of Jericho would very likely think that these people are crazy. Number 4, they were filled with confidence. Day 7 was going to be fun. All this time they had been following all the instructions in detail, just as Joshua told them. And now they come to day 7, and these guys were just abounding in confidence. Number 5, it happened just as expected. My friend, when they marched around the last time, and the musicians who were prior to now only blowing regular tunes, on this occasion the trumpets blew a military blast. I can only imagine that the people from Jericho were laughing at these idiots marching around the city. This is crazy, but you can't miss this. The trumpets blew so hard, and the crazy people shouted as loudly as they could. Guess what? The walls, the strong walls, the impenetrable walls collapsed. A thunderous applause was heard all around, and those bad walls came down. What is going on here in this story? Joshua had become a man of faith and he walked by faith. This whole story is one of faith in action. It started off with Joshua meeting the angel, the commander of the army of the Lord. Joshua did not waste time asking for whatever message God had sent. Sometimes you are facing some issues, and in that moment, the one thing you need is to hear from God something about your situation, and that comes out of your relationship with God. Then they got instructions from God and they obeyed. Faith requires hearing from God and obeying what He tells you to do. What they did was crazy. And don't you just love how faith makes you do some crazy things? But it's all in the package. They followed the instruction God gave them with confidence. God is in control, so all we need to do is to do what He says. Then, just like God said, the walls came down and they were able to go in and take full possession of what was promised hundreds of years ago. My friend, you can do the faith thing too, but it starts with a relationship with God. You might have some wall in your life that is blocking you from your blessing. Do the faith thing and follow what God says, even if it sounds crazy. Your prayers can be answered if you have faith in God. Have confidence in God. If He tells you to do something, know that your walls will be sure to come down when you have faith in God.